Wake up! It's the Saturday Morning Podcast. Let mom and dad sleep in and come back with me to the 80s. Let's grab a bowl of Golden Puffs or Apple Cinnamon Cheerios and flip on the tube. I've got the TV guide and hours of nothing to do. My name is Chris, and I love all the Saturday morning cartoons. When I was a kid, I lived for Saturday mornings. Now that I'm an adult, I want to relive all those great shows and see where they came from. Let's take a deep dive back to the 80s and see what's waiting. Rewind! Question: if there's something strange in your neighborhood, who are you gonna call? If there's something weird and it don't look good, who are you gonna call? No, really, who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters? No, the real Ghostbusters. That's who ABC called in the fall of 1986, bringing the big screen hit to our living rooms on Saturday morning. It's the story of Egon, Ray, Peter, and Winston as they canvass New York and answer the call to fight ghosts. Keep your Rice Krispies away from Slimer as we get on the grid and explore the real Ghostbusters. And theme song.
Don't look good. Who you gonna call?
In the fall of 1986, ABC launched The Real Ghostbusters in the 10 a.m. time slot. The series followed the adventures of 4 ghost chasers as they took down the paranormal in New York City. They worked out of an old firehouse with the sliding pole still intact. In the basement was the containment chamber that held all the ghostly apparitions that they caught. To help detect spirits from the other world, they used a PKE meter, short for psychokinetic energy, that allowed them to verify ghostly energy. Pretty useful to have a machine that can track ghosts that you can't always see. A red flash from the meter meant a ghost or other spirit, green meant paranormal substance, and blue meant cursed artifact. This device was the oldest working tool that the Ghostbusters had in their arsenal. To zap the ghosts on the run, they strap proton packs on their backs. These heavy backpacks are nuclear devices that produce positive ions to counter the negative ions that paranormal activity is made of. Consisting of a backpack and wand, the Ghostbusters can use the energy to paralyze a ghost, which is then collected in a trap. The traps were designed to capture ghosts on a temporary basis. They would then be transported back to the firehouse and emptied into the containment unit. The traps were designed to capture ghosts on a temporary basis. They would then be transported back to the firehouse and emptied into the containment unit. To get the guys around town, they used a refurbished hearse known as Ecto-1. These devices were the brainchild of Dr. Egon Spengler. Defined by his wild hair, Egon is the scientific genius behind the tech. He's got a dry wit and is the guy who's usually so consumed by work that he blocks out everything else. The co-creator of the Ghostbusters is Dr. Ray Stantz. Where Egon and Ray differ is that Ray leans towards practical applications. Where Egon can think of a device or a principle, Ray can engineer it to happen. He's also the most childlike in the group, sleeping with a stuffed Marshmallow Man doll and watching cartoons. Despite this, his intelligence is only second to Egon. Dr. Peter Venkman, a paranormal psychologist, is the unofficial leader of the Ghostbusters. He decides if they take a case or walk away from it. Peter is usually the most sarcastic and provides comic relief when the boys are up against it. Because he's not the most likable, Peter gets volunteered to do things the others just don't want to. Winston Zedmore was the last to join the Ghostbusters and was an outsider. He was simply looking for a job and proved himself during a paranormal takedown. It's been said that Winston is an avid reader, quite the shooter with his proton gun, and straight man for the group. Rounding out the characters is Janine Melnitz, the secretary of the Ghostbusters, and Slimer. Janine's got an interest in Egon, but he's oblivious, tied up in his work. Slimer is the ugly little green spud that the Ghost Punchers found on their first service. Slimer has turned into a mascot and a pet for the Ghostbusters. He's also gotten the gang into trouble through his antics. In 1984, the #1 movie of the year was Ghostbusters. It told the story of 3 scientists who set up shop to defeat ghosts in New York City. Part comedy, part paranormal thriller, it was a ghost adventure unlike anything released before. While the movie went up and down the box office charts, it conquered 1984, raking in $282 million worldwide. The movie itself was the brainchild of actor Dan Aykroyd, known for Trading Places and his pioneering stint on Saturday Night Live. He had envisioned the movie to star him and John Belushi. And why not? This team had been successful in The Blues Brothers and as a duo on SNL. The original concept, entitled Ghost Smashers, dealt with a team that traveled in time and space to tackle huge ghosts. While writing a line for Peter Venkman, Aykroyd received news that John Belushi had died. With only 40 to 50 pages of the script complete, Aykroyd approached Bill Murray for the Belushi role and found that Murray was receptive. Needing to finish the script, Aykroyd partnered with Harold Ramis, who is a writer, actor, and director. Ramis came from a comedic background and had a string of hits under his belt. As a writer, he wrote the screenplays for Animal House, Meatballs, Stripes, and Caddyshack. Aykroyd, Ramis, and eventual director Ivan Reitman worked together to craft a story and script for a movie that was affordable and shootable for the studio. It was once rumored that Aykroyd's original idea would have cost $350 million to shoot in 1984 dollars. With the script done and film cast, the movie got underway. In the summer of 1984, Ghostbusters was #1 for 7 straight weeks upon release. Throughout the rest of the year, it managed to resurface at #1 an additional 4 times. It was so huge, it managed to stay in release for a whopping 81 weeks. Columbia Pictures, the studio who financed Ghostbusters, saw the potential to create a franchise from the Ghost Stompers. They needed a sequel, but due to the popularity of the film, the actors were now in demand and getting other offers. Schedules conflicted, and who knew when a sequel would come to be. To keep the brand alive in the desert of waiting, Columbia needed to keep the Ghostbusters front and center with their audience. Saturday morning was a viable home for the Ghostbusters. It would be a cartoon based on a hot property. Kids wouldn't have to wait years for new material, just a week. If the show was successful, all the other trappings would follow, like merchandising opportunities. There was just one problem with having a Ghostbusters cartoon. It had already been done. In 1975, Filmation Animation Studio produced 15 episodes of a live-action show called The Ghostbusters. It centered around bumbling detectives who chased after ghosts. It was a comedy that starred Forrest Tucker and Larry Storch, both formerly of the 1960s comedy F Troop. Oh yeah, and get this, there was a gorilla named Tracy. Filmation owned the name Ghostbusters, a problem Columbia encountered when making the live-action movie. Columbia had to license the Ghostbuster name from Filmation to make their own movie. When it came to developing the cartoon, it was decided to name the series The Real Ghostbusters for 2 reasons. 1, to tell you this is the real deal Ghostbusters and they had no gorillas, and 2, so children wouldn't get confused by the original Ghostbusters, a cartoon from Filmation that also aired in 1986. Filmation's Ghostbusters surfaced as a cartoon to capitalize on the success of the movie, which had nothing to do with the Filmation show. You know, other than the title. In 1986, there would now be 2 Ghostbuster cartoons to choose from. One with Slimer, and the other with Tracy the gorilla. To develop the real Ghostbusters for Columbia, the studio brought in Joe Medjuck and Michael C. Gross, both associate producers on the Ghostbusters film. Both men were also regular producers in Harold Ramis's camp and were likely the best choice to keep the Ghostbusters grounded in the original concept. Credited as the story editor was J. Michael Straczynski, who also proclaimed himself to be the fifth Ghostbuster. Straczynski wanted to bring intelligent storytelling to Saturday mornings. The stories he longed to tell were sophisticated and in the same scary comedic vein of the original movie. Straczynski had been in animation for several years at this point, having worked on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and the sister series She-Ra, Princess of Power. He was a fast and prolific writer who turned out 29 teleplays across 3 different series between 1984 and 1985. With Straczynski's emphasis on quality, well-known writers were recruited to work on the series. This would help ensure that The Real Ghostbusters was not just a kiddie show. Notable writers from the earliest episodes included Stephen Barnes, science fiction novelist and frequent collaborator with Larry Niven. David Gerrold, novelist and screenwriter. He is probably best remembered as the writer of Star Trek's The Trouble with Tribbles and several non-fiction Trek books in the 1970s that helped to keep the crew of the Enterprise alive in the off years. He's also written original science fiction over the years, including The Man Who Folded Himself and When Harley Was One. Steve Perry, author of the Matador series and writer of comic books, also contributed several episodes to the series. And Michael Reeves, writer of numerous short stories and novels. He was also a frequent collaborator with Steve Perry. With these giants of science fiction and fantasy in place, The Real Ghostbusters was a go project. Now, all they needed was the perfect cast. The number 1 on the call sheet for The Real Ghostbusters was Lorenzo Music. Known as Carlton the Doorman on Rhoda, Music's voice was instantly recognizable for the low tones and wry wit. Born Gerald David Music in Brooklyn, New York, he changed his name to Lorenzo for spiritual reasons. Lorenzo is a derivative of the word laurel, which was a symbol of wisdom and accomplishment. With his wife Henrietta, Music formed a comedy duo that lasted 8 years. In 1972, Music and Henrietta wrote the theme song to The Bob Newhart Show. With the success of Carlton the Doorman, Music made it his trademark never to be photographed directly. His dry sense of humor made him a perfect fit for Dr. Peter Venkman, a role originated by the likewise dry-witted Bill Murray. Maurice LaMarche was born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada in 1958. His acting career started in 1975 in front of the camera in live action. While gravitating to voice work over the years, he found a home in 1985 as exasperated Chief Quimby in Inspector Gadget. In 1986, Moe, as he's known to his friends, auditioned for the role of Egon Spengler. The producers made it clear they did not want a Harold Ramis impersonation. Deciding to ignore this direction, LaMarche put on his best Ramis and got the part. Frank Welker won the part of Dr. Ray Stantz, bringing animated life to the character originated by Dan Aykroyd. There is a very boyish and absent-minded charm to Ray that Welker brought. There are also shades of Freddie Jones from Scooby-Doo Where Are You in his tones. This comes as no surprise, as Welker was the original Freddie Jones. Known for being able to produce quality animal sounds, Welker was also cast as Slimer. The producers auditioned many voice actors for the role of Winston Zedmore. The role was given to Cleveland-born Arsenio Hall. As a child, Hall wanted to be an entertainer and perform magic. Setting out for a career in comedy, Hall landed the position of second banana to Alan Thicke in the short-lived late-night talk show Thicke of the Night. When this was canceled at the beginning of 1984, Hall found work on the TV series New Love American Style. Up until 1986, Hall had only been a guest star or a co-host. When he landed The Real Ghostbusters, he was part of the main cast. Laura Summer started her career in 1982. She quickly landed roles in The Facts of Life and Night Court before being cast as the shrill but lovable Janine Melnitz. She was also the Hanes inspector in training in a series of underwear commercials in the 1980s. Her ads for Hanes were part of her commercial work, and she's been in more than 100 commercials during her career. At the end of the second season, 3 of the principal cast members were replaced. According to Maurice LaMarche, actor Bill Murray was not thrilled that his character sounded like Garfield. The producers may have taken this to heart to recast the role of Peter Venkman. Also out the door were Laura Summers, Janine, and Arsenio Hall as Winston Zedmore. Michigan-born actor and comedian Dave Coulier replaced music as Venkman. Coulier had plenty of experience in voice work and was a natural fit to try to capture Murray's sardonic wit. At the same time he landed the real Ghostbusters, he also grabbed a co-starring role on Full House as Joey Gladstone. Kath Sochi, born in Ohio, had roughly 5 credits in a career spanning nearly a decade. She took over the role of Janine Melnitz and would continue on until the end of the series. While she was on the real Ghostbusters, Sochi continued to guest star on other series such as Pound Puppies and The Smurfs. Buster Jones took over the role of Winston Zedmore. Jones was no stranger to animation, having worked on Super Friends and the Harlem Globetrotters. He would even find himself on G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Gem. New to the cast was Roger Bumpus, who took on the role of Louis Tully. Tully was the Ghostbusters accountant and eventual lawyer, as played by Rick Moranis in the feature films. Bumpus put in his dues in the voiceover world, lending his vocals to Richie Rich and Alvin and the Chipmunks. His first credit is perhaps his best. In 1979, Bumpus appeared in a live-action movie titled, get this, Disco Beaver from Outer Space. I don't know if this is available anywhere, but you can believe I'm gonna find out. After these messages, we'll be right back with the premiere of The Real Ghostbusters.
And now these messages.
Free ride, pull. Okay, the McDonald's Happy Meal guys.
Roger, hamburger,
fries, and soft drink,
all regular size. How do you like the ride so far?
Ride? What ride?
There are 4 different McDonald's Happy Meal boxes featuring Lego building sets. You get one with each Happy Meal you buy. If one set has this much excitement, you can imagine how much more you'll have with 4. McDonald's Happy Meal featuring Lego building sets. You can collect all 4.
You can imagine a Rock Lord world with the forces of heroic Boulder, Granite and Nugget battle Magmar and his evil henchmen, Sticks and Stones and Tombstone, each sold separately. On both sides, rock vehicles, gruesome rock gnarlies plus rockosaurs, all in the awesome world of Rock Lords.
Powerful living rocks.
Rock Lords, rock vehicles, rock gnarlies, and rockosaurs, each sold separately. New from Tonka.
You work so hard, now have some fun and yum it up with a new kind of bubble yum.
Yum it up.
Lemon and lime at the same time, 2 flavors in one.
Yum it up.
Strawberry and banana combined in one bubble yum. You work it hard, now have some fun. Yum it up with bubble yum bubble gum.
I love to yum it up.
2 flavors in one, new luscious lime and banana berry split.
Yum it up with bubble yum.
We now return to the real Ghostbusters.
If you watched the premiere of The Real Ghostbusters, the date was September 13th, 1986. Ronald Reagan was the President of the United States. America was listening to Take My Breath Away, the theme to Top Gun by Berlin, the #1 song in the land. Moviegoers excitedly went to the theaters to see Corey Feldman and River Phoenix in Stand By Me. On the cover of the TV Guide was the 1986 Fall Preview Special. If you were a kid in 1986, maybe you got up early and got yourself breakfast. Maybe you had a new cereal like a bowl of Rocky Road or Almond Delight. The opening starts with feet, the feet of a ghost. Within seconds of starting, the average viewer in the 80s would recognize the iconic theme song, Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters, which was written for the 1984 movie in about 4 seconds. The ghost struts down the street like he owns the joint. Then he gets slammed into the red no symbol and becomes the Ghostbusters logo. He also loses his feet. At Ghostbusters HQ, the phone rings, the sirens go off, all the Ghostbusters jump into action. and Slimer takes care of Winston's sandwich. We're immediately sucked into the world of these ghost punchers. It's all there. The firehouse, the pole, the guys, and the Ecto-1. Slimer's off with them to defeat his own kind after giving a quick and sloppy kiss to Janine. The Ecto-1 busts out of the firehouse and onto the streets of New York. And then, it's a bunch of creepy looking ghosts. A blue meanie blowing raspberries, a pink ghost with 10 eyeballs, a brown cucumber that's ribbed for her pleasure. But at the top of the chain is the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. But you know what? I ain't afraid of no ghosts. The Ghostbusters get them all, and the day is saved. Who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters. The word real appears from a Tinkerbell-like burst of magic. It's to let you know that these aren't the original Ghostbusters. Well, these aren't the original TV Ghostbusters, but they are the original movie Ghostbusters. And now they're real, while the other Ghostbusters are original. Maybe the original Ghostbusters aren't real, and we all had a strange dream with a gorilla. Of course, while these are the real Ghostbusters, they don't look like the real Ghostbusters because likeness rights. The story, Ghosts Are Us, starts with a shot of the city in neon magic, the siren of the Ecto-1, and strains of that earworm theme song. Our poltergeist punchers with the proton packs show up to a scene of screaming people in front of a candy factory. When the factory erupts into a shower of chocolate, the crowd screams and flees. You can be sure that if it's raining chocolate, I'm staying planted. Like Slimer, I would have a field day cleaning up all that chocolate. But I draw the line at using my tongue to lick the streets of New York clean, especially in the 80s. That's how you get a syringe to the mouth. Egon warns that the situation could be more dangerous than it looks. Ray kicks open the door to the factory. While they rush in, Ray gets hit with a pile of chocolate to the face. The quartet finds Slug, an orange ghost that's slinging out chocolate from the vats. But he's not alone. There's also a messed up looking Zonk and lady ghost Snarg. I'd like to know who in the afterlife is handing out these great names. Is there an application to get one of these names? Why don't they keep their Earth names? Wait, were those their Earth names? Can you imagine being called Zonk while still alive? Anyways, Egon thinks that the bizarre dimension they came from was New Jersey, which makes sense. I can't tell you how many friends I have in New Jersey named Slug and Snarg. The ghosts manage to give chase around the factory. They squeeze into pipes and go where the Ghostbusters can't. Winston gets chocolate-faced and the particle throwers get turned on. Venkman throws his stream and forces the ghost out and into a trap. But not before the candy equipment bursts open and makes for a gooey, ghostly situation. Winston celebrates by saying, "We got him," when he did nothing. What's all this "we" stuff, Winston? Outside of Conrad's chocolate factory, the Ghostbusters are being celebrated, and Conrad himself is there to give the guys a year's worth of chocolate in boxes too small to hold a year's worth of chocolate. Maybe it gets refilled every month. Back at Spook Central, the guys surprise Janine by giving her the boxes of chocolate. What's even more surprising is that the boxes are empty because Slimer is a pig and went crazy on the chocolate in the Ecto-1. Venkman gets slimed and threatens to blast the angry little Spud. Ray tries to play the shame game, but Slimer is oblivious to insults. Tired, the guys head off to bed. Janine is apparently going to work through the night at her desk. Slimer tries to find junk food and goes through all the drawers in Janine's desk. And Ray gets to put the ghostly trio that they busted into cold storage in the basement's containment unit. While sleeping, Ray is snuggled up with his Stay Puft Marshmallow Man doll, and Slimer dreams of food acting like sheep and jumping over hurdles. He's so hungry, he eats his pillow. And then the feathers tickle his nose so much he sneezes himself through the ceiling. Still hungry, Slimer goes down to the kitchen to raid the fridge. He wakes up Winston, who's on his trail. Looting the fridge, Slimer goes to the basement, and he accidentally shuts off the containment unit. But you can't guess what happens next. Slug, Snarg, and Zonk. Man, it sounds like I'm having a stroke. But the ghostly trio escape, now free to roam the night and scare the pants off of anyone they want. Slug has a plan. He wants to shut the Ghostbusters down. He's got a plan, but it's flicked away by Zonk before he can tell it. At a doctor's office, Zonk shows up and makes faces at the doctor. Because a ghost monster wearing a diaper that looks like a reject from Shrek is scary when he's making faces. While the doctor runs, Slug and Snarg come out of nowhere to save the day. They also look different, having morphed their appearance. Just as the Ghostbusters get to the hospital, they arrive to applause, but not for them. For Ghosts Are Us, Slug and Snarg in disguise as ghost chasers. Snarg has a suspiciously high voice like she's channeling Janine. She's got bright hair like Janine and funky glasses like Janine. What a ripoff. Maybe one of them should be the real Janine and the other one should be the original Janine. Just an idea. And a ripoff is what the Ghostbusters are worried about. I wonder if they'll rebrand themselves as the original Ghostbusters. After all, they were first. But I wonder if that would make Slug and Snarg the real Ghostbusters. Can you imagine if Venkman and crew lost control this early in the series and they were replaced with a guest cast? I wonder if this is how Filmation felt. Oh, wait, I see what the producers did here. They're making fun of their rivals. That's really original. Anyways, Ghosts Are Us tell the Ghostbusters better luck next slime and drive away. And talk about imitation, their van has a ghost on it with a big red X over it. Getting a call at the firehouse, Janine identifies them as the real Ghostbusters. And the caller hangs up because Ghosts Are Us is better. This has been happening all day and the Ghostbusters are losing their customers. Egon verifies that Ghosts Are Us is legit because of a PKE reading he took on the captured ghost from the night before. A real call comes in from a hotel and the guys are off. When they get to the hotel, there are multicolored lights shooting out in all directions like a phantasmic paranormal party. Before the Ghostbusters can even meet with the manager to start, Ghosts Are Us are done and have the situation contained because they started it. From the trash can containment system, Zonk pops up, but none of the Ghostbusters pay much attention. Winston says there's something familiar about all this. He's not wrong, it happened just like this minutes ago. Slug and Snarg pat themselves on the back for beating the Ghostbusters at their own game. They figure they need to beat the Ghostbusters one more time and then the Ghostbusters will be out of business. Apparently the Ghostbusters' finances are so weak that 3 services can put them out of business. And if that happens, maybe Ghosts Are Us will get their own series, toys, and comic books. They should hold out for a movie deal. I'd pay to see Dustin Hoffman play Slug. In the Ecto-1, the Ghostbusters, the original ones, figure out that Ghosts Are Us are really the ghosts they captured this morning. Janine says the PKE meter showed 3 ghosts missing from the containment unit. Egon says that the system had to be turned off for them to escape, and all fingers point to Slimer. The green ghoulie hides and Venkman vows to blast their mascot. At headquarters, Janine gets a call from a toy factory. The Ghostbusters are dispatched and expect to see their escaped ghost there. But the toy factory call came from Ghosts Are Us, and they called it in from, get this, a phone booth. And all 3 of them are in the phone booth, and this is too much for any phone booth to handle. At the toy factory, old and abandoned, the ghosts are looking for their friend Turlock. If they were really trying to find Turlock, they should try just outside Modesto. Slug goes into the bowels of the toy factory, rattles the bars, and cries out for Turlock. The plan is to use Turlock to scare the Ghostbusters out of business. If only they could have found Gilroy and used his garlic stench to drive the Ghostbusters away, they might be successful. But Turlock isn't there. Instead, there's some smoke monster with an eyeball, one huge eyeball that emerges from the dark pit where Turlock should have been. The eyeball is pissed that Slug woke him from his nap. Like, he's in a real bad mood. You ever wake a little kid up from a nap because you needed to be somewhere? Yeah, it's almost as bad as that. The eyeball mush monster chases the ghost around the toy factory but stops to pick up some toys. It takes these things into a chamber of some kind and transforms. The Ghostbusters, the real ones, arrive and find they're the first ones there. But they're not, as the ghosts of Ghosts Are Us rush out of the factory. The newly transformed monster follows, and it looks like a KB toy store threw up. Egon says that this is a Class 10 monster, and to prove it, the needle of Egon's PKE meter breaks through the side, because cartoon. To stop the monster from destroying Manhattan, Winston and Peter will try to head off the monster. Ray and Egon will use Ecto-2 to give chase. What's the Ecto-2? It's a motorcycle-like vehicle with 3 wheels and wings. Peter deploys Ecto-2 and the adventure is on. The Ecto-2 takes to the air and the monsters stomp on Manhattan rush hour traffic, all to the soft pop 80s strains of the band Tahiti. True story. During all the destruction, we see what happened to Eyeball Harry when it transformed. It looks like a huge bike with a huge alphabet block on it with a huge clapping monkey on top of that. I suspect Kenner will never want to turn this into a toy. Maybe that's why it was designed to look like this. The big wheel block monkey monster is trashing all the cars on the Brooklyn Bridge. Peter and Winston need to take a shortcut to get ahead of the monster. Ray and Egon land on the bridge and wait for Slug, Snarg, and Zonk to run toward them. With particle blasters and trap waiting, the Ghostbusters are ready, except that they don't need to use the particle blaster. The ghosts quickly jump into the trap because of the evil that's coming. It's too big even for them to handle. But it's not over yet. The big wheel block monkey monster is right on top of them. Peter and Winston are driving on the rail of the bridge to bypass all the traffic. You know, like real New Yorkers do. Winston tells the team that they're almost there. Venkman takes a second to shame Slimer over the radio. The battle begins. Ghostbusters versus the toy monster. When they take out the monkey, a jack-in-the-box head pops out of the block. Ray uses a grappling hook and rope to restrain the monster, but it backfires and the monster spins the Ecto-2 around and around. But this is where the show about ghost chasers stops being realistic. If a human body were spun that quickly, puke would be everywhere, on Ecto-2, on Slimer, on the camera. Also, Ray and Egon would probably pass out, and quite possibly die, and this would be the most horrific Saturday morning show ever. Instead, the monster crashes Ecto-2 and sends Slimer into a puddle of slime. Peter and Winston throw their particle blasters on it, but it's useless. Just like Venkman thinks that Slimer's useless. And that gets Slimer thinking about how all this is his fault and how terrible he is. So, in an effort to get his name on the show one day, Slimer slimes the bridge and makes it all slimy. Egon and Ray put Ecto-2, still tethered to the monster, on overload. The monster slips off the bridge, crashes into the East River, taking Ecto-2 with it. The monster emerges from the river in its true form, as an eyeball and a maw full of teeth. And then Ecto-2 explodes and takes the monster with it. The day is saved thanks to the real ghost, thanks to Slimer. Venkman does his best Billy Crystal, doing Fernando Lamas to tell Slimer, "You look marvelous." So SNL, so New York, so 1980s. For his compliment, Venkman gets kissed by Slimer and gets a mouthful of ectoplasm. Winston says it's a happy ending. This is possibly the last time the words happy ending were used on Saturday morning. As the song says, "Bustin' makes me feel good." The Ghostbusters save the day over Ghosts R Us, proving they are the real ones. Suck it, Filmation. I mean Ghosts R Us. The end. Of the 140 episodes produced, there are 3 that fans agree were the best from the run of The Real Ghostbusters. The funny thing is, in the case of this series, all the best episodes are from Season 2. And those episodes are: Number 3, The Collect Call of Kalalu. When the Necronomicon is stolen from the public library, the Ghostbusters must track it down by fighting creatures in the sewer and chasing down cults. Written by Michael Reeves, this was a tribute to H.P. Lovecraft and other Golden Age science fiction writers. There are references to T.E.D. Klein, Clark Ashton Smith, August Derleth, and Robert E. Howard. Number 2, The Thing in Mrs. Faversham's Attic. The Ghostbusters are commissioned to fight possible ghosts in the attic of an old lady. They must go to a place where the lady has not been for 70 years. It turns out that Miss Faversham's father imprisoned some sort of spirit in the attic. And number 1, Knock Knock. A story about workmen in the subways that accidentally open a door to hell and lets demons into our world. This episode and Miss Haversham were written by J. Michael Straczynski, the series story editor. He would go on to write a total of 24 episodes between the series premiere and the end of the 1990 season. It may also be interesting to note that this episode was originally considered to be the pilot for the series. It's unclear what changed, but the studio went with Ghosts or Us for the first glimpse into the real Ghostbusters. Was it a phenomenon? Yes. The real Ghostbusters ran for 7 years and 140 episodes. After the third season, it was rebranded as Slimer and The Real Ghostbusters. At the time the show aired, audiences wanted the Ghostbusters. It was only 2 years out from the blockbuster film. The film had even stayed in theaters until 1985. When the show started up, the production team was working with a proven winner. The focus was on not screwing it up. When the pilot aired, it was clear the scare factor was there, as well as the essential traits that endeared the characters to us in the movie. What followed was a true adaptation of a film property that raised the bar on what would come after. When Ghosts or Us premiered on Saturday morning, it was easy to see the film in the episode. While this wasn't a sequel, it was a logical extension of the movie. This was the next chapter. As a kid, it was exciting to know that the next installment would drop in just 7 days. As a phenomenon, it didn't change the world, but it did take it by storm. The real Ghostbusters weren't based on a line of popular toys as He-Man had been. There was no pressure to put a character into a story because the toy company was going to release it in 6 months. The team at The Real Ghostbusters were a polished group of science fiction writers. They understood character and they wrote to their strength within the story framework. They didn't have a toy company overseer as other shows of the time had. But they did strike up a deal with Kenner, the maker of the successful Star Wars action figures. There were figures of the Ghostbusters, but the best figures were the ones made of the ghost. They went from our TVs to our hands. The figures had a unique feature. They could flip around to assume scared poses. The monsters would go from being normal looking to their apparition form. The spring mechanism caused a super fast change from one form to another. Super cool back in the 80s. They even produced a tall Firehouse headquarters playset with the pole and a garage to park Ecto-1. There's a proton pack and ghost trap. Man, you have no idea how much I wanted a ghost trap back in the day. I never had money, so I never got one. To this day, when I see one online, I stop and I think about it.
There's something strange in the neighborhood.
So who you gonna call? Ghostbusters!
Okay, where are those ghosts? Yow! They're everywhere. I'll reel this one into Ecto-1. Bankman, over here. It's Bug-Eye. I think he's got his eye on you, Winston. Uh-oh, somebody needs a dentist. Watch it. That's Squisher. I've been gooped. Gross. Let's turn these ghosts into toast. Neutralize them.
Ghostbusters, each sold separately. From Kenner.
We ain't afraid of no ghosts. Yeah!
Anyways, toys weren't the extent to the real Ghostbusters' popularity. They wore on lunchboxes, they had their own comic book line, they were on clothing appearing on shirts and shoes. They were in books, you could buy real Ghostbusters stickers, Slimer watches, Ghostbusters phone, and even a Ghostbusters ceiling fan. As any kid of the 80s will tell you, you didn't arrive until you were a cereal. The cereal consisted of a no ghost logo in various colors with ghost-shaped marshmallows.
Let's bust out some ghosts!
There's a cereal in the neighborhood with O's and ghosts.
Tastes real good!
Who's favorite O's? New Slimer ghosts. Ghostbusters taste great with milk and juice and toast. A complete breakfast with the ghost.
Ghostbusters! Everything's okay, guys. Want some Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters?
Okay. What's it gonna crunch?
Ghostbusters!
Ralston would put out a total of 3 serials. In 1985, they released one for the Ghostbusters movie. It was rebranded as The Real Ghostbusters and then Slimer and The Real Ghostbusters for the TV shows. They often featured real Ghostbuster comic strips, posters, or even a holographic ghost on the front. Beyond the merch and cereal, the show was nominated for various awards. In 1987, The Real Ghostbusters were nominated for a Daytime Emmy for sound editing. They got the nomination for Best Animated Series in 1989 for the Young Artist Award. And finally, they were up for another Daytime Emmy in 1991, this time for Outstanding Animated Program. Sadly, they were always nominated but never a winner. After these messages, we'll look at what happened to the creator and actors and explore the legacy of the real Ghostbusters.
Milk it does.
Hey, milk it does a body.
Milk it does a body good. Pass it on.
It's one to grow on.
Great to pour on frosty cold and furthermore.
It's full of what you're thirsty for. Wow.
It is.
It makes you feel good because it tastes so great. It really does a body good.
Pass it on.
Milk it does.
Milk it does the body good.
Milk it does a body good. Pass it on.
Today on the weekend special, something strange is happening.
Really? My name is Ralph.
The mouse and the motorcycle today.
We now return to the real Ghostbusters.
In the years after the real Ghostbusters went off the air, many of the cast went on to other projects. Story editor J. Michael Straczynski would go on to write for the 80s Twilight Zone and become a writer-producer for Murder, She Wrote. In 1993, Straczynski created and produced his best-known show. Babylon 5 hit the airwaves congruently with Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Unlike Deep Space Nine, B5 was filled with unpredictable characters, strange alien races, political intrigue, and deep character development. Of the 110 episodes, the creator personally wrote 91 of them. He wrote an astounding 53 of them in a row between seasons 2 and 5. Joe, as he's known to his friends, currently writes comic books and has written for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Lorenzo Music, the voice of Peter Venkman, would go on to play Tummy Gummy on Disney's The Gummy Bears and appear on Tailspin a number of times. His most iconic role may be that of a certain lasagna-loving orange tabby. He was the originator of Garfield's voice for network specials and the eventual Garfield and Friends TV show. Maurice LaMarche, who voiced Egon Spengler, went on to several unique roles. Doing a spot-on impersonation of the late Orson Welles, he found work in Tim Burton's Ed Wood as well as The Simpsons. Taking his Wells voice to new heights, LaMarche originated the role of the Brain on Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain. He is currently poised to reprise his role on the Animaniacs revival in 2020. Arsenio Hall, the voice of Winston Zeddemore, would find work in the Eddie Murphy movies Coming to America and Harlem Nights. In 1989, he threw all his energy into hosting the Arsenio Hall Show, a late-night talk show to rival legend Johnny Carson. It lasted 5 years and is best remembered for the crowd's enthusiastic dog barks and that time presidential nominee Bill Clinton stopped by and played sax. Hall will next be featured with Eddie Murphy in Coming to America, the sequel to the 1988 Coming to America. This would obviously be less confusing if you actually saw that the current movie has a numeral 2 in the title. Laura Summer, who voiced Janine Melnitz, continues to find work as a voice actress. Since 1999, she has been the voice of Patamon in the Digimon series. She's also credited with casting a few projects. Summer earned the role of executive producer for the series Fight It or Bite It. Dave Coulier, the second actor to voice Peter Venkman, found success with 8 years on Full House and recently appeared on the Netflix revival Fuller House. He may be best remembered for the cut it out shtick on that show, as well as his many impressive impersonations. His pop culture claim to fame, however, may be his boast that he's the subject of Alanis Morissette's song, You Oughta Know. Buster Jones, who played Winston Zeddemore in later seasons, remained in voice work. He played on such shows as Batman the Animated Series and Extreme Ghostbusters. He retired in 1998 and passed away in 2014 at the age of 71. Kath Sochi, the second Janine, played Dexter's mom in Dexter's Laboratory and various characters in Futurama. Perhaps her most famous roles were as Phil and Lil in Rugrats. As with the Animaniacs, Rugrats is set for a revival in the near future. And finally, Roger Bumpus, the voice of Louis Tully, is still active in voice work. Will he join the cast as Tully after the release of Ghostbusters 2 in 1989? Bumpus was only in 13 episodes. He found success as the Chief on Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. But his most famous role came in 1999 and shows no sign of slowing down. His methodical tones can still be heard as Squidward tentacles on SpongeBob SquarePants. When it comes to the Ghostbusters, the legacy is a no-brainer. There was a demand to issue this series on DVD, and Time Life heard. The series was made available on home media in 2008. In 2009, there was a video game released on various platforms. It featured the voice talent of the original cast, minus Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis. Many fans consider this to be the true sequel to Ghostbusters 2. And why not? It was written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis as the original film was. There are many concepts in the game that Aykroyd wanted to use in a sequel. One of the best things about the game, I believe, is that the game was developed by Atari, one 80s icon helping another in the new millennium. In 2016, there was a reboot of the Ghostbusters mythos starring Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy. It was released to mixed reviews, which sealed its fate as a one-off and not a new franchise. At the time of this podcast, Ghostbusters Afterlife is in production with a 2021 theatrical release date. Jason Reitman, the son of Ghostbusters director Ivan Reitman, is directing. Hasbro has announced that they will release a line of Ghostbusters action figures directly inspired by the Kenner action figures from the 80s based on the real Ghostbusters. In a recent tweet, former story editor J. Michael Straczynski asked, "Hey, Jason Reitman, saw the video of you and Ivan Reitman at the Hasbro relaunch of Real Ghostbusters toys. Wouldn't this be a time to bring back the real Ghostbusters? New animation? Live action? Puppets? Hand shadows? Semaphore? Hello? Is anyone there? Is this thing on?" Straczynski, now co-creator of Sense8 for Netflix, may be in the perfect position for a reboot of The Real Ghostbusters. If he's still a fan after all these years and in a position to bring it back, I would hope he would. I know The Real Ghostbusters had appeared on Netflix before, and I'm sure that they wouldn't mind getting it back again with new episodes. The function of The Real Ghostbusters was to keep the brand alive between Ghostbuster movies. In reality, the series went beyond that. It kept the stories in spirit with the movies while giving the viewers a deeper understanding of Venkman, Spengler, Stantz, and Zedmore. It took on a life of its own and got away with more than a cartoon series of that time should have. It became more than just a placeholder or a way to sell toys. It became its own thing, and that legacy is still alive today. Should The Real Ghostbusters be revived? Write and let me know. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. If you go to patreon.com/SaturdayMorn, you'll find a page where you can help to support this Saturday Morning podcast. There's a $5 level for general support and a $10 level that unlocks some goodies. At $10 a month, you get entered into a drawing to win a signed production script of an episode, bonus content, a membership card, email priority for all Saturday morning memories and general comments, and a monthly shout out in an episode. As long as you keep supporting us, we'll keep recognizing you. This month, we recognize Scott Gunstream, our first patron. Scott, thanks so much for helping to make these episodes possible. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for joining us at the Saturday Morning Podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review wherever you get your episodes. If you'd like to drop us a line, please write to satmornpod@hotmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at satmornpod. If you'd like to support us to create more of these things, find us at patreon.com/SaturdayMorn. Supporters will get extra content and a chance to win behind-the-scenes prizes and given email priority. Do you have any vintage Saturday morning memories? Email your story and we could read it on the next episode.